Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kat. I've been living in Chiang Mai since 2019. And on this channel, I share my tips and recommendations for those who are wanting to live abroad, live in Chiang Mai, live in Thailand. And in this episode, I wanted to dive deep into health insurance. So, in another video, I had shared my experience with my motorcycle accident and having ACL surgery in Thailand, but I felt like I just gave snippets of what my experience is like. I wanted to do a deep dive into just a lot of the most commonly asked questions, and again, things to ask for, what to look for, differences between public hospitals and private hospitals here, and kind of what that experience is like. So let's just dive into quality of care in general. A lot of people always ask, well, if you go to a hospital, can they speak English? Can you communicate? Yes, that's not a problem. A lot of people also ask about like the technology, like do they have the same equipment? Yes, a lot of the hospitals have very modern, up to date equipment, just like you would have anywhere else in the world. It's also interesting because a lot of people, like Thailand is really known for healthcare. So people come from all of the other surrounding countries and come here specifically for health related things or for plastic surgery or for whatever it is that they need. Even I saw so there's a condition called TSW, topical steroid withdrawal. And I actually saw on TikTok a few people that had actually moved to Thailand for 4 or 5 months out of the year to get the treatment here. There's a specific device, I don't know exactly the name, but come here specifically for that. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's this misconception that healthcare outside of the US is not great. And Thailand has, I don't know if it's the number one, but it's one of the best in Southeast Asia. It might actually be number one. I don't know. And then in terms of just affordability, I mean, that's pretty obvious, or maybe not for some people, but yeah, affordability of healthcare here is unmatched. You don't even need, in if you go to a hospital here and you want care and you're a foreigner, if you have a passport, they're not going to turn you away. They're going to take you. And obviously, you're going to need to pay the fees or the costs or whatever associated with what you need that day. But it's not like in the US, if you don't have insurance, they're not going to see you. There was multiple times here where this was when I think I was still on just like temporary travel insurance and I needed to go to the emergency room because I was just feeling awful or whatever that happened. And yeah, they just for my passport registered me in the system, and yeah, I was seen within 20 minutes. It's not like in the US again where you're turned away or you're in the emergency room for 8 hours. A lot of the care here is very fast and affordable. And then also, there's public hospitals here, but there's also private hospitals which is often more expensive. But I've had experiences in both. When I first moved to Thailand in 2019, I had a really bad stomach infection from food poisoning, and so I had to stay in the hospital for 2 nights. And this was a more public, I think it was a public hospital. It was a little more run down. I would say the cleanliness, and this is just my experience, was not as great as it was in the private hospital that I used for my surgery this year. It's not to say that the care was any different. The care was still really great. They were very attentive, but it was just a different level, I think. And so, regardless of if you go to a public government hospital or a private, more expensive hospital, the care is still going to be great no matter where, but it's just what you're more comfortable with. And then there's also clinics. So, let's say you don't need to go to a hospital, you just need to go to a clinic to get tests done. So, a lot of the clinics here, I would say, especially that are geared more towards expat and foreigners, can be a little pricey depending on, maybe you want to do a food allergy test or if you just need blood work. I will say, on average, like I had blood work done, and I want to say I paid no more than like $20. And that includes meeting with the doctor and getting results. They sent me an email with all of the results. And so yeah, I think people get worried about that too. Like government hospitals versus private hospitals. I wouldn't worry about it. The care is still going to be great no matter where you go. But yeah, just depends on everyone's level of comfortability. So, the second question I want to go into is how I got covered, how I found my broker that I work with here, and how I got signed up in general. So, I actually had a friend who's also been in Chiang Mai for, I think he's been here longer than me, like 7 years. And at the time, I was only on temporary travel insurance, so it wasn't full coverage. And before that, when I first moved to Thailand in 2019, I was on health insurance through my employer. So I was counseling at a school, and so that was covered. So yeah, I spent some time on temporary travel insurance, which I wouldn't recommend. I'll get into it in a second, but yeah, my friend recommended me to this broker. He signed up with him and had really great experience. And so I met with him. He showed me a few different options. I told him what I was looking for and asked me about, health conditions and other, just general questions that are pretty standard, I would say. And yeah, so he gave me a few different options. He wasn't pushy towards one plan or the other. He was kind of like, these are the different companies, these are your options. This is my experience with this company. This is what I've experienced with this one. And so I went home with the pamphlets, did my research, kind of asked around, and I decided on ACS, which is the plan that I always recommend here. It's a French company, and they have I think the like claims office, and they have offices all over the world. But I'm pretty sure the claims office here is in Bangkok. Um, but yeah, so I sent him, my passport details, filled out the application, and I had my insurance within a week. So they sent me, the fee. There's an annual fee. I think it's only like $30. And I'm paying monthly. So they sent me all of that in a week, I would say. And then I was all set. And so the process was pretty simple. It's not like, I mean, I can't even remember what it was like in the US with getting insurance because it's been so long. Okay, so let's dive into the health insurance specifically. My plan covers inpatient only, meaning if I have to stay in the hospital for, more than 24 hours or, whatever the situation is and they're making me stay in the hospital, that is what it covers. But outpatient, meaning, I go to the hospital, but they don't say that I need to stay, I have to pay that out of pocket. And so when I initially signed up, I mistakenly didn't understand what that was. Not just because I, didn't do my research, but because I've never really had to use my insurance. I mean, even in the US, I've had insurance, my entire life working. And I just never had to use it aside from, I'm sick, I need to see a doctor. Nothing for something as serious as, my motorcycle accident or a surgery or an emergency in general. And so my coverage is only inpatient. But now they've actually updated and switched their plan. So I'm actually going to be switching to a different plan that they have, which covers both inpatient and outpatient. So outpatient, you're sick, you want to get some tests done, that's covered. But also inpatient again. So if you need to stay in the hospital for surgery, all of that. And it's actually at a cheaper price point. And so I'm excited to switch to that and have more coverage and pay a little less. But I think what people also don't realize is also there is a limit. So, when I had my accident and my surgery, initially they weren't going to cover my outpatient because it wasn't included in my plan. But my broker actually spoke to the head office and said, hey, this is considered outpatient, but this is all get connected to a surgery that she's required to have from the doctor. And because it's related to an emergency that happened, a surgery which will require me to be inpatient, so I'll have to stay in the hospital for a few nights. Can this be considered, can this be reimbursed? And thankfully, I was able to get it reimbursed because it was related to an inpatient procedure, if that makes sense. But it's really complicated. But now, if you sign up, there's options for both, so you're not having to, get approval for things like this. So I chose this specific plan because not only do they cover me in Thailand, but they cover me all over Southeast Asia. So all the countries here. They also cover me up to 7 weeks in Europe and up to 7 weeks in the US. But again, you have to remember that there are limits. So if you go and you need outpatient coverage, they'll cover up to a certain dollar amount. And then once you reach that amount, you have to pay the rest out of pocket. But the limits now that they've updated their plans are really great. So, if you're traveling in Asia in general, it's pretty affordable. So you're not likely to hit that limit just because the limit is the new limits are a little higher. But for mine, I reached so I had my limit at $1,500 for um, outpatient coverage. I think it was outpatient. No, yeah, it was $101,500 for outpatients, and I had reached that limit. So basically, what my broker was asking approval for, hey, this is related to her surgery. I had reached my limit. So then anything that I needed to pay after that for the rest of the year is out of my own pocket. But again, I'm excited to switch to the new plan because I won't have to worry about that, and the limits are much better. But Just something to keep in mind. So, the other thing I wanted to talk about is short term travel insurance like Safety Wing versus expat health insurance, long term health insurance. Because I see a lot of people that are traveling, they're like, they always recommend Safety Wing. I haven't used it myself, but what I do know is that it's very, very limited in terms of what it covers, and it's not meant to be a long term insurance plan. So if you're wanting to move to Thailand and you want to live here long term, longer than a year, however, whatever your plan is, I would definitely recommend looking to expat health insurance. It doesn't have to be the plan I'm on specifically, but just doing your research because I've heard nightmare stories of people needing, they got in an accident or whatever. And there was just issues with using the short-term travel insurance. And so I would just play it safe. That's all I'll say about that. Okay, the last thing I want to go into is just some common mistakes or things to know about health insurance in general, specifically in Thailand, because these are the things that I, had to learn as I was going through my, motorcycle accident recovery and all of that. And so I hope it's helpful for you. So just understanding, for one, who to contact in an emergency. Most insurance plans will have, a number that you can contact, like a claims line. For me, I mean, it was on the back of my card, so it was easy. But I think a lot of people, when you're in that moment, you panic or you're just not sure what to do. And so, yeah, just knowing who to contact, whether you have a broker as well. So I contacted the claims line and then I also called my broker and I was like, hey, I was just in an accident. This is what happened. Am I following the right process for what I need to do, etc. The other thing is not everyone has a broker, but in my opinion, I would recommend it, especially if you're overseas, just because it helps kind of be that middleman for you. So if you can't get in contact with the claims line for whatever reason, I haven't had issues with my company, but there was a few times where I sent something in and I wanted to just make sure that I filled it in correctly, or I wanted to know how long, I would expect to get my reimbursement or just little things like that. And so my broker was always available to kind of be that middle person or contact, a lot of times they have connections to people within the insurance company, like headquarters. And so if there are things that come up, you have someone to kind of help you navigate that conversation, which I find is really helpful. And then this might seem obvious, but again, for a lot of us, like I've never had to use my health insurance until this accident. And so just understanding, the differences between like the language between what's inpatient coverage, what's outpatient coverage, what are your limits, do you have deductions, just understanding that all, because again, if you're in an accident or emergency or whatever your situation is, I think it will just make things much more smooth, because I think it caused a lot of unnecessary stress for me because I'm in an emergency room. I'm just trying to get a hold of someone to make sure I have coverage for what I need. And yeah, just not understanding the terms and language for things, I think caused a little panic at first. And so I think that could also be really helpful. And then also just knowing which hospitals are within your network. So most health insurance companies will work within a specific network. And so, if you go to a hospital outside of that network, maybe they won't cover it 100%. For example, thankfully, I was able to find one that was within the network. But in Thailand or in Chiang Mai, even like there's not so many hospitals to choose from. So it's not an issue. But I think just being aware of that, because even for things like clinics, so for example, I'm paying out of pocket for my physical therapy now because I chose to go to an outside clinic, not a hospital. And they're still reimbursing me, but if I was to go to a hospital, they would pay it up front rather than me having to pay first and then reimbursing me because it was out of the network. So there's ways around it, but I think just being aware of that can also be really helpful. And the last thing I'll just say again as a reminder, I would not depend on short term travel insurance if you're wanting to live somewhere long term. There's no shade to some of the companies that a lot of travel content creators recommend, but I will just say, as someone who has experienced an accident and surgery and just a major surgery in Thailand, I think it's really important to understand the differences because there are a lot of limits to having short-term, travel insurance like that. It's meant to just be for short-term travel. So that's all I'll say again about that, but just wanted to plug that again. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I just, I've seen so many accidents or people, get into really serious motorcycle accidents or just health things in general, and they don't have insurance. And then it ends up, you see them having a GoFundMe page because they can't afford to pay it. And so I just want to prevent that from happening for all of you. I know traveling is all like fun and games, but if you're planning to live somewhere long term, I think it's important and necessary to have health insurance, long term health insurance. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, I'll put in the description below the broker and the company that I used. But if you have specific questions, you can email me. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos. And I'll see you in the next one.